In the near future, virtual reality games have become incredibly popular all over the world. Because of this, many development companies have picked up the trend of creating such games. As a result, the struggle between them became more and more fierce over time. Big companies are constantly trying to create the highest quality game possible. The main character was one of those who create such games with the support of artificial intelligence. The guy was greeted by a hologram of a girl and told him that from now on she would help him. The girl asked to call her Grace. She had big eyes and long golden hair. The guy himself was of ordinary appearance with glasses, but nevertheless, he was the main developer of a gaming company, and his name was Murphy. Grace was the most advanced existing artificial intelligence in the entire world, and so Grace and Murphy began creating games together. In the first stages of development, they encountered many system errors, bugs, and other difficulties. They heard different things in the game. Sometimes they were almost flooded. Sometimes they were almost killed by lightning, but they didn't give up. They went through a difficult journey to overcome all difficulties, but soon, with Grace's help, Murphy was free to spread his creative wings. Murphy continued to face various difficulties, but Grace was always there to help the guy with his work. And then the day came when Murphy and Grace achieved the result they had been working towards for so long. Finally, they were able to look around the created game world, and they had sincere smiles on their faces, signifying happiness. Finally, they created a game that all future users will call truly high quality. This game was recognized as the best massively multiplayer online virtual reality role-playing game. Murphy managed to create a game with the fantasy world of Wing Online. One day, the guy was sitting at work on finalizing the gameplay. Suddenly, Grace turned to him. Murphy asked her what happened. The girl asked what would happen to her when they finished the game. The young man answered her with a smile that she would become the goddess of this place and asked Grace to take care of this world. But the artificial intelligence, it seems, was not very happy about this news. She asked Murphy if this meant that she and the gentleman would soon say goodbye. The guy was confused by these words. Murphy himself did not expect that this could happen. The young man offered the girl the option that she could contact him, and in the future, many other projects would be created. But Grace didn't even listen further to the guy. She turned away and said that it was unlikely that she would help with them, since she would be busy here. Murphy agreed with the girl. He said that she was probably right, because she would have a lot of work if she started managing the entire game. Grace began thoughtfully that one day, when this world came to an end, as now, the girl asked the young man to stay with her. The artificial intelligence turned to the developer and smiled a sincere and kind smile. Murphy opened his eyes in surprise and was silent because he did not know what to answer. For some time after, the developer sat on a chair and said something. He looked disheveled. At the end, he summed up that this is how he sees the next major update. It's been a long time since their company launched Ving Online, a full 5 years already. One of the people present in the discussion room entered into a dialogue with Murphy. He was the general director of the company's commercial department, and his name was Sam. The man said that previously they had a stable number of players, but recently their number began to fall, as a result of which sales also decreased. Sam added that the commercial department was proposing to add an in-game payment system in the Season 6 update, to which Murphy indignantly wondered why on earth. The general manager of the commercial department was shocked because he expected Murphy to approve of this proposal. But the developer continued to sit with his hands behind his head. He irritably asked Sam who allowed him to add this payment system. But the man, slightly confused, replied that all this was for the benefit of the company. But Murphy repeated the director's phrase and suggested that if he thought that way, the other executives should agree to sell the company's shares at the end of the year. Some of those present sat, keeping a straight face, and some openly began to worry, because Murphy's words turned out to be true. The developer added with an evil smile that they thought this decision would raise their price at least a little, and told them to act. One of the men present told him to stop discussing such things here. Murphy went on to say that they should release an improvement to the server next, but if they plan to make it a moneymaker, then wholesale selling the stock after the price goes up will end up hurting the company even more. The developer concluded that this will all lead to the end of the game, and the balance between small investors will be destroyed. Murphy asked the CEO about how many companies have gone bankrupt for the same reason, due to the introduction of an in-game payment system. In conclusion, the developer said that all this will not happen while he works here. The guy said that he would not allow them to cheat in the game he created. But all the men gathered in the hall were tensely silent, and the general director was tormented by excitement that his insidious plan was so easily revealed. One of those present could not stand it and shouted to Murphy that he was crazy and no one was going to cheat. But the guy told him that if they wanted, they could always fire him. The developer got up from his chair and headed towards the exit, but as he left, he added that they didn't have the courage for that. Murphy said that if they do decide to fire him, they shouldn't expect him to change his mind. With these words, the guy slammed the door of the discussion room with all his might. The men remaining in the hall began to discuss the behavior of the developer. They called him names, said that the meeting had just begun, but immediately ended in a quarrel. But someone said that nothing could be done. After all, he was the creator of the game. But others said that it was still impossible to behave this way and decided to try to persuade him. But the general director himself was silent. He looked very gloomy. Meanwhile, Murphy walked irritably along the corridor. He thought that the chairman's son was too suspicious in appearance. 3 days passed. During the day, something strange happened on the main square in the online game wing. All participants in the game stood calmly in the square. Suddenly, a player appeared in the square. Everyone present immediately noticed him. Some simply turned and looked at him, while others were surprised and even panicked. The player began to be enveloped by something small and black, similar to clusters of aura. The player himself extended his hand and forcefully asked for help from characters with healing abilities. But then the player fell to his knees. Those present began to suspect that the guy was poisoned with something. One of the players ordered to quickly use purification on him. A girl with a staff emerged from the crowd of players. She decided to help the poisoned player with her energy cleansing, which removes negative statuses from the target. The purification was aimed at the player and began to affect them, but the black aura of poison spread faster. The infection consumed half of the guy's body, and half of his body fell to the ground. Everyone present was shocked. They did not understand whether the guy died or not. A status arose that the guy had turned into dust, which no one understood. The rest of the players were enveloped in panic and fear as the black dust began to spread further. After some time, information about this incident reached the main office of the game, and the community message board was bursting with the number of messages. John, who was the head of the quality assurance department, burst into Murphy's office and told the developer that it seemed that the game was spreading into an incurable epidemic. The guy added that the problem is that if you die because of this virus, your account and character disappear forever. Murphy was calm. He said that he would go and check now. The developer added that the problem should not be serious and asked John not to worry because they would restore the accounts when he finished checking. But the head of the quality assurance department was not sure of the guy's words. Therefore, John added that, in all likelihood, this will not be easy to fix because the players are going crazy. But Murphy no longer listened to him. He closed the gaming booth and entered the game himself to figure out what was happening in it. A system message appeared on the screen, prompting the guy to select the mode he wanted to access. The young man answers the system that he wants to select developer mode. A new system message appears on the screen, stating that a connection is being established with developer mode. Murphy was instantly transported into the playing space, and then the guy appeared in the game on the main square. The guy greeted all the players and introduced himself as Game Master Anchovy. At the same moment, the players asked him why he couldn't fix the game. The developer explained that they are currently trying to figure out the cause of the current issue and fix it as quickly as possible. But players were outraged at how a character could disappear completely and asked Anchovy to make sure they returned. The developer posted a message that an urgent check would be carried out as a result, but people began to become even more indignant. Anchovy added messages that user accounts and characters will be returned after verification. They will all be restored. But the players' dissatisfaction only grew, so the developer simply switched off. Anchovy was transported to another game location, where there were no characters, in order to finally be in silence. The guy noticed the black dust flying around. He caught one part of it and realized that this was an epidemic status that he had created. The young man's plan was to sow panic in the game, to spread the status of an epidemic throughout the entire gaming space. Anchovy wanted to infect all players with this epidemic. But then Murphy realized that things were much more serious than he had imagined. Then Grace turned to Anchovy, who asked why the guy was conducting such a terrible experiment. But Murphy replied with a smile that he was hosting it as a tribute to the classic games. The developer spoke about the most famous, massively multiplayer online role-playing game of the 2000s, in which a bug arose that caused an epidemic. Grace was surprised and asked again. Murphy clarified, adding that the problem had become so serious that even documents related to the game were published. The young man said that he had not seen such classic game events in other modern games, so he tried to recreate them in this game. Murphy added that the problem is that it has become a fatal bug that cannot be controlled by the in-game system. The young man noted this as a little wasteful, but there was nothing he could do about it. The guy asked Grace to delete all data from here. The girl responded with approval. And in theory, then everything should have gone away, but the epidemic remained. Anchovy began to suspect that it was all because of Grace. Murphy asked the artificial intelligence to report the current status, but Grace did not respond. Suddenly, someone's words were heard behind the guy's back that no one would answer him, no matter how much he called. Then CEO Sam appeared next to Murphy. The man announced to Anchovy that from now on he has no access to the data of this game. The developer turned around and angrily asked the director what he was talking about. But Sam answered the guy with joy on his face that he was saying that he was fired. Murphy's face was filled with shock and bewilderment at the CEO's sudden announcement. Sam explained that in today's news, the serious incident that happened in this game was because of an employee who rebelled against the company. He deliberately created a plan to destroy it. And the company, having learned about this, decided to fire him. From these words, Murphy stood in a stupor and remained silent. The director also added that the guy will force him to pay the damage through lawyers. Anchovy asked Sam if he came up with it himself, but he replied that Murphy should not worry because he would make every effort to lead the project in the guy's place. The CEO said the developer was taking a bite that was too big for him to chew. With these words, Anchovy swung his fist at Sam, grabbing him by the collar with his other hand. A couple of fist centimeters from the CEO's face, something stopped this blow. Grace flew from the sky at super speed, breaking the tiles into huge blocks from the power of the landing. The guy's head was pressed against the stone slabs by a powerful collision. Grace towered over the developer, blocking out the sun. The girl pressed the guy's face tightly to the ground with her foot. The young man did not understand the motive for her sudden action. Anchovy was approached by the CEO, who laughed evilly at this. Sam asked what Murphy thought and what it was like to be reunited with his past partner in this way. The man added a question about whether the young man hoped for the loyalty of the artificial intelligence, but Anchovy tried to be indignant that he would not leave it like that. The CEO laughed and repeated the guy's words and told him that he was crazy. Sam asked the developer what he thought the man was doing all the time that Anchovy lived in the virtual world. The director told the young man that in the real world he was just a cog in a much larger mechanism, and to survive he needed to adapt. And in the end, Sam suggested that the guy pull himself together and add a sense of reality to his own algorithm. The man told Murphy that even if he didn't do this, he would have to look for a good lawyer to pay every last penny, and at the end of the monologue he wished him good luck. Anchovy mentally promised that Sam would not succeed, because Murphy had already decided that he would personally put an end to this world. At that moment, the guy's face was illuminated by the light of the room, and the doors of the gaming booth opened. Security guards had gathered at the booth, waiting for the guy to leave. Murphy mentally promised that soon the CEO would see the worst possible ending, the bad ending. There was news on TV that at a major Korean game development company, one of the employees said that he did not like the company's policies. It turned out that he deliberately added a virus bug to the game. More than 70% of this company's annual sales come from the online game wing. The young man watched the news and mentally talked to Sam, claiming that his plan was imperfect. Murphy knew that if the game died, then the company itself would die. Anchovy decided to change from home clothes to play clothes. The guy again mentally spoke to the CEO that although he said that maybe Murphy was only a minor detail in reality, but in virtual reality, he was a god. The guy put on a gaming helmet and mentally told Sam that they would see each other soon, because God is really angry. The young man sat down in the gaming chair to enter the game. The guy's plan was to start the end of the world in Ving Online, and so Murphy moved into the gaming dimension. Someone addressed the guy, calling him Master. The unidentified boy told Anchovy that he was worried because the youth had not logged online yesterday and asked if Murphy was hurt. This guy's name was Oasis. He is the one who replaced Grace when she became the artificial intelligence of this world, and the guy acquired the artificial intelligence with the company's money. But Oasis was registered to Anchovy's personal account, so it did not disappear. The guy explained to the artificial intelligence that he had some unfinished business and immediately asked Oasis if he received notifications every day. The boy answered in the affirmative and said that the organization had sent him a letter. The artificial intelligence opened the letter and began to read it. Oasis was horrified by the news that his master had been fired. He realized that he had not yet come to his senses. The artificial intelligence realized that Murphy could not access the game developer's servers. The boy immediately tried to console his master by telling him that this company was not the only one that was engaged in development, and there were plenty of places that needed capable people like him. But Murphy brushed off Oasis's proposals, telling him that he didn't need it. The young man ordered the artificial intelligence to open a connection channel. Anchovy explained that the address is disguised, as if it were coming from China, and all the files where important information about the operation of the system is recorded are faked for different accounts. The guy added that if at least one of them is tracked, then he should get rid of them all. Oasis replied that he understood, but did not know why this was necessary. Murphy asked the boy to listen more carefully. The guy continued that from now on they will begin to destroy the Wing game online. With these words, the young man pressed the button to enter the game. Icons appeared on the screen that said violence, fear, crimes, inappropriate behavior, and also a system notification appeared that the game contains extreme content and advice not to play if you have a weak psyche and body, and so on. Anchovy moved into the playing space where he was met by Oasis, who was dressed in women's clothing. The boy greeted his master, saying that he was here. Murphy was angry at him because it took him too long to simply create a character. But Oasis explained that this was his first time becoming an in-game character, which is why customization took so long. The artificial intelligence was happy that it finally had a real body. But this angered Anchovy. The Oasis glowed with happiness. It was interesting and exciting for him. He liked this wonderful feeling. But much to the boy's regret, Murphy did not share his joy and moved forward, leaving behind the rejoicing artificial intelligence. Oasis noticed that his master had gotten far ahead of him and rushed to catch up with his master, begging him to wait so that he could go together. The guys came to some village. It was quite lively there. Due to the disconnection from the organization system, all online information related to Wing was reset, so everything appears new. Therefore, Murphy waited for more, and Oasis followed him and glowed with joy. Anchovy didn't understand why his artificial intelligence was so happy. Meanwhile, the boy dreamily thought about adventures with his master. For him, they were like a dream. Oasis asked his master what they would do, and immediately suggested that since they were low level, they could hunt squirrels, since they were only level 1. The boy continued to reason that they would first take the task from the village chief. But Anchovy interrupted him and asked him to hold the torch in the chicken. Oasis did not understand what his master's actions were. Therefore, the artificial intelligence decided to ask Murphy why they needed a torch. But the guy was immediately surprised by what kind of question he was asking, and answered that the torch was needed, of course, for arson. With these words, Anchovy set fire to a haystack standing nearby with a torch. Oasis was horrified by the actions of his master, but Murphy gloatingly told the boy to repeat after him because they needed a character with notoriety. Suddenly, the flames of fire spread throughout all the houses of the village, and a system message appeared that the guy had committed a crime, for which he earned 10 points of dishonor. Murphy was surprised that setting a house on fire only gave 10 infamy, but suggested that it might be because they were in a newbie village. Suddenly, an old man approached the young man and tugged him by the shoulder. Grandfather demanded Anchovy to stop immediately, but Murphy, with a calm face, set fire to the old man's clothes. The grandfather instantly burst into flames and screamed from the pain of his burns. It only now dawned on Oasis that this was not an adventure, but a crime. A system message appeared that Murphy had killed a non-player character and earned 100 dishonor points. The guy was happy and said that he knew that the game system would give a lot of points for killing non-player characters. The artificial intelligence was indignant and asked what his master was doing, but the young man told him not to worry because he would resurrect anyway, and then the old man's corpse instantly disappeared. But very close by, a new hologram of the old man's non-player character began to appear. The grandfather approached the guy and greeted him, introducing himself as the headman of this village. But Murphy immediately brought a torch with fire to him, causing the old man to catch fire. The young man was delighted to discover an easy way to earn dishonor points. Meanwhile, Oasis watched in horror at the actions of his master and prayed that at least someone would stop him. Suddenly, someone's scream was heard, indicating what was happening with the guys. A crowd of villagers pointed at Murphy, who set fire to their village and headed to a showdown with him. They were already a couple of meters from Anchovy and were armed. Oasis mentally begged them to stop their mad master. But Murphy dealt with them in the same way as with the village headman. Some of the surviving residents fled in fear away from the ferocity of Anchovy. Meanwhile, the system displayed messages one after another that the guy had killed an NPC and earned 100 points of infamy. The artificial intelligence realized that his master said those words seriously. Oasis almost cried from the horror of what was happening. After all, Murphy is really going to end the Wing online game. Suddenly, the knights ran up to the guys. They surrounded the criminals and ordered them to stand because they were arrested for crimes. All the knights were armed with spears and pointed them at the young men. Oasis stood in fear, not understanding what to do next. But Murphy smiled maliciously. The guys were put into a carriage and taken somewhere. The cart was surrounded by 3 more riders as backup. Meanwhile, in the carriage, the young man looked at his earned dishonor points There were 2,140 of them, and the artificial intelligence was upset and could not believe that they went to prison from the very beginning. Anchovy reassured the boy, saying that a different place awaits newcomers. This is an advantage for novice players to make it easier to get used to. The guy added that even as a beginner, you can still make money from dishonor, and asked the artificial intelligence what would happen then. Oasis replied that he did not know. Murphy explained that in this case the village of newcomers would change to a city of crime. Meanwhile, the guys had already been brought to the place. It was quite spacious, and there were some objects standing there. Murphy settled down to sit on the floor. The criminals were rather rudely shoved into some room. The knight angrily said that this ditch suited them perfectly. Finally, the man spat in the direction of the young men and left. The guys were left in this place, and the knights themselves went about their business. Murphy explained to the boy that if a player reaches a certain number of dishonor points, he receives a reward. Now the guards were not attacking him, but the thugs were hunting for him. This is the only city where players with a bad reputation can survive. This city is called Underground. Oasis asked if there were any positives to this city. The young man answered him that instead of them, the guys could take a hidden task that no one had ever received. This was a villain's quest, available only to the worst players in the world. The artificial intelligence noticed that it was directly about his master and thought that it was quite effective if Murphy aimed at him. But Anchovy explained to the boy that not really, this was just a desperate step. Oasis asked the guy why he was taking risks then. Murphy explained that he worked hard to develop this task, but no one knows or uses it. The guy added that this is extremely sad. Suddenly someone called the guys. A man in a black cloak appeared in the darkness. He commanded the young men to approach him. The guys hesitated in surprise, but the man repeated the request and added that he had good news for them. Murphy explained to the artificial intelligence that this man is a non-player character who is issuing this task. The stranger said that he couldn't believe that the young man had already earned so much dishonor. It seemed to him that the guy was not one of the usual villains. The man introduced himself as Dean. He was a dark magician. Dean added that the guys seemed ready to serve the Dark Lord. A hologram screen with a system notification appeared in front of the boys. The message says that the Dark Mage Dean is trying to make them a member of the Dark Cult. The condition of the task was to earn more than 1,000 dishonor points as a newcomer. Then the class will change to a hidden Dark Mage. Oasis told the master that this was incredible, so this is what he wanted. But Murphy, smiling wickedly, summoned a fiery torch. Anchovy looks at the boy questioningly. Artificial intelligence began to doubt its assumption. At that moment, the young man directed the flame of the torch at the magician Dean. Oasis screamed. He asked the guy to stop, because the magician could give him a hidden class and clarify whether this is what his master came for. But Murphy did not stop. The boy shouted to him about why the guy continued to kill the magician Dean. The artificial intelligence called Anchovy crazy, but the guy explained that he was not a pervert for killing an NPC without a reason. Suddenly, Dean's charred body rose from the ground. A dense, gloomy blue curtain of energy formed over the magician. Oasis was surprised by what he saw and was frightened, and Murphy smiled slyly, because it seemed that everything was going according to his plan. The charred body of the magician began to change. His limbs began to be covered with armor. A few moments later, a knight appeared in front of the guys, covered in this dark blue energy. The gloomy entity spoke. She said that she could not believe that the guy killed Dean, and the knight added that he had been waiting for a long time for people like Murphy, thoroughly imbued with evil. For some reason, the artificial intelligence felt insulted. The entity introduced itself as Terry, commander of the Dark Knights, and ordered to follow him. Terry said that he would find a suitable use for their anger. Then a hologram screen appeared with a system notification that Terry, the commander of the Dark Knights, wanted to create a Dark Lord character, and the reward of the task was to change the class to a hidden Dark Knight. The young man explained to Oasis that he was just looking for the Dark Knight. The artificial intelligence was surprised by the guy's words and seemed to like their content. The boy invited the gentlemen to go together, and the boys followed into the dark portal. The location changed to an even gloomier one. The new room resembled a medieval castle. It was illuminated by fiery torches. Terry and the young men ascended to some kind of spiritualistic circle. The knight welcomed the villains to the new place. But Terry said that before he bestows the title of Dark Knights on the guys, he asked permission to ask them a few questions. The knight started from Oasis, he called him. Murphy quietly explained to the artificial intelligence to give a negative answer to Terry's question, because he would have another task. But the boy was indignant. He called the gentleman petty, because he wants to appropriate all the class work only for himself. But Anchovy explained to the boy that they should advance together. If both are of the same class, then the balance of the group will be upset. Murphy added to Oasis not to worry, because the second quest would be perfect for him. The Dark Knight turned his gaze to the artificial intelligence, leaving him shocked. Terry said that the only and absolute ruler of this world is the Dark Star. Does Oasis agree with this? After hesitating for a second, the boy gives the knight a negative answer. This answer makes Terry furious. He screamed at the boy, how dare he deny the Dark Star, and announced to Oasis that he had not passed. The Dark Knight chased away the artificial intelligence. Terry turned to Murphy and asked him the same question. The question is whether he agrees, to which Murphy agreed. Anchovy added that the only person capable of ruling the world can only be a Dark Star. Terry praised the young man for his excellent answer. The Dark Knight asked the guy, as a minion of a Dark Star, whether Murphy would devote himself to a dark cult. The guy agreed to this. Terry asked the young man, as a member of the Dark Knights, if he would take it upon himself to destroy the followers of the light. Anchovy replied that this is exactly what he wants. The entity praised the guy for his answer and asked his name. The young man introduced himself as Leo. The NPC asked one last question to Anchovy. Will Leo dedicate his body and soul to the Dark Lord? A system message appeared with a text that said if the guy agreed, he would become a Dark Knight, and asked if he agreed, to which the guy gladly agreed. A system message appeared that Murphy has become a Dark Knight. Friendship has been established with a dark cult. Mana points will be removed. All skills will require health points. All skills are available only to Dark Knights. They will be unlocked depending on the character's level. Another message said that the unique characteristic of the Dark Knight, diabolism, had been unlocked. The guy began to reason that if he raised the level of dishonor, he could endlessly become stronger. The guy added that his indicators will be reset to 0 when he is caught by the guards, and the young man will have to raise the level of all his skills again. In these extreme conditions lies the beauty of the task. Oasis was annoyed at the thought that instead of adventure, they had to commit crimes and be on the run. The knight congratulated the young man on joining the Dark Knights and gave him a small gift. It was a huge sword. But Murphy noted that the chalk was too small and thought that it was necessary to install the original weapon so that he could get a normal one, and the system displayed a new message about the appearance of the sword. The Dark Knight told the guy to go and spread the name of the dark cult throughout the continent. Oasis wanted to leave to get the task, but Murphy stopped him. The guy decides to kill Terry. For the sake of a bright future for the dark cult, the guy raised his sword against the knight. In the game, you earn experience and level up by hunting monsters. Equipment can be obtained by purchasing it with gold received from quests. Sometimes you can do collecting, or you can do cooking. Join groups with friends, go on adventures, and go on group trips to dungeons. After all, this is the essence of a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. Spending 9 hours hacking away at an NPC who can't even respond is abnormal gameplay. But if this is the path that Mr. chose, Oasis decided to follow this path. The boy grabbed the torch tighter and ran towards the knight with it to help Murphy. The artificial intelligence jumped up and raised the torch straight into the knight's face. Some of the flames touched Terry's armor. The young man called Oasis a fool because the Dark Knight was immune to fire and the boy was not a member of the dark cult. Anchovy added that if a non-cult user attacks him, Terry will fight. The artificial intelligence looked from Murphy to the Dark Knight. The entity raised its giant sword upward, intending to strike at the Oasis that attacked it. It only took half a second for Terry to behead the weak boy. The head of the artificial intelligence flew far from the battlefield. A system message appeared, which suggested that he be revived in the village. But upon revival, he would receive a 3-day penalty for lack of experience. Oasis called the gentleman, but Murphy explained to him that if he stopped attacking Terry, his health points would be restored. So the young man asked the boy to wait a little. Anchovy added that if he was reborn in the village, he would receive a fine, so the guy advised him never to do this. The artificial intelligence asked the master to hurry up, but 3 hours later, Murphy was still fighting the monster. And finally, the guy deals a crushing blow to the Dark Knight, cutting off the entity's head. Anchovy picks up the enemy's helmet and raises it up to show Oasis. The guy boasted that he was able to avenge his artificial intelligence, but the boy asked to resurrect him as soon as possible. A system message appeared that the resurrection stone had been used. Murphy brought Oasis back to life. The artificial intelligence rubbed its neck and said that it did not want its head to be cut off again. But Anchovy was only interested in what things happened to Terry. The young man came closer to the body of the murdered Dark Knight. A system message appeared about the appearance of a mask. The guy noted that the mask was of a unique class, but there are restrictions for magicians below the 85th level, so the young man cannot use it. With that, Murphy threw her back into Oasis's arms. Anchovy said that he would sell it later, but for now he asked to keep the mask with him. The artificial intelligence twirled the mask in its hands, examining it. The boy had a terrible feeling. The second item dropped from the night turned out to be a poisonous basilisk potion. Murphy said that this would be useful to him. The third item dropped was an unknown key. Oasis became interested in what this key was needed for. He began to glow with feelings. But the guy replied that he would tell him about its purpose later. But the artificial intelligence began to be indignant that the guy was playing on his own and not sharing any information, and they also cut off his head. Oasis wondered why he and the master came here in the first place. Murphy asked the boy not to be offended and pulled him towards the portal to return to the village. Although the artificial intelligence would have been offended, it did not resist its master. They entered the portal, which closed behind them. The severed head of the knight became a hologram and then disappeared completely. The Dark Knight's body was restored again. He said that everything was as he predicted. Meanwhile, the young men returned to the underground. The oasis was already blooming, because now it must receive its task. But Murphy noted that there was something else. The artificial intelligence got angry and asked what again. The guy said that as Oasis knows, the service of the Game Wing Online began 5 years ago. Playing as a criminal has many more disadvantages than advantages. This means that the people in the underground are scum. They can be easily defeated by just destroying at least one of their gangs. Murphy continued that the guy they're heading to is considered the king among these psychos. Anchovy concluded that the artificial intelligence could call him the king of psychopaths. From these words, Oasis didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The boy asked why to meet with him at all. The young man replied that to start a big business, you need a lot of things. But what is really important is money. The guys went out onto some crowded street. Suddenly, one man called a walking knight towards him, who looked around cautiously. The unknown person told the man that his face showed that he was being pursued by bounty hunters. The masked man said that he had the lowest prices in Korea and guaranteed him a 100% safe transaction. He couldn't find a cheaper one and offered to pay on the gold exchange. But another man said that he would kill his wife if she found out and walked past the masked stranger. The merchant thought to himself that, as expected, marriage was dangerous. That was not why he was single, but simply did not want to get married yet. But then Murphy and Oasis approached this man. Anchovy immediately stated that he wanted to meet with his boss. The masked man looked askance at the newcomers. He noticed that they looked like garbage, and they ignored such people. The merchant stated that he was an ordinary player, but the young man asked the man to tell Alex that Anchovy had done a lot of things. The man's expression instantly changed to one of concern. But still, the stranger pretended that he had no idea what Murphy was talking about and added to the guy that he had made a mistake. And the man himself started to run away. Oasis asked the gentleman if they would let him go like that. Murphy calmly told him to wait, and the artificial intelligence asked the guy who Anchovy was. The young man explained that Anchovy was the nickname that the guy used for his Game Master account when he was working on the game. Oasis was horrified by what he heard. He asked Murphy if it was possible to reveal his identity like that. But the young man simply replied that the information here is confidential. These are the rules of this place. And besides, Alex will not spill the beans. The young man mysteriously added that Alex knew him personally. Meanwhile, 2 unknown men crept up to the waiting guys. One unknown person was carefully looking around the corner for his surroundings. Oasis turned to the young man, hinting at someone else's presence. But Murphy briefly replied that he knew. Alex sent even more of his psychos. One of those unknown people came out to Anchovy and told him that the boss wanted to see him. They put a bag on Murphy's head. He asked them to be more gentle. The artificial intelligence screamed in excitement for his master, but the guy told Oasis not to worry. And he added that for safety reasons, they also put a bag on the boy's head. The bandits took the guys into some mine. Oasis and Murphy, in addition to having bags put on their heads, also had their hands tied. One of the group of thugs told the boss that he had brought them, and he allowed them to enter. The guys were taken into some room and released. Their masks were taken off and their hands were freed. Alex examined Murphy carefully. Then he simply said that he was not Anchovy. Some events earlier, outside the game space. Murphy left the coffee shop and went about his business. The guy was just drinking coffee and was lost in his thoughts, when suddenly someone called him. The developer turned around and asked the stranger who he was. The stranger simply introduced himself, calling himself Alex. The stranger didn't add anything else, but Murphy seemed to recognize him. The guy asked Alex why he decided to find him that way, and added that he could write a statement to the police. Murphy added whether the guy was going to add stalking to his case. Alex explained that otherwise they would not have met. The guy began to beg Murphy to drop the charges, asking him to show mercy at least once. With these words, the man bowed his head down. Alex vowed that he would never do anything illegal in the game again. Murphy just sighed deeply in response. Anchovy explained that he followed the company's rules, so he could not help Alex in any way. And at the end, he added that even if he could, he wouldn't, which plunged Alex into confusion. The man fell to his knees in front of Murphy in great despair. Alex began to beg the guy with all his might to save him this time. And before Alex's eyes appeared Anchovy himself, who remembered his words from the previous meeting. The boss was confused. He seemed to recognize Anchovy. Alex stood up abruptly and slammed both hands on the table with all his might. The man ordered all his subordinates to leave his office. Everyone present walked out the door, leaving your guys to talk. Alex returned to his seat and sighed thoughtfully, but then he stood up again and approached the serious Murphy. His look changed from stern to affable and blooming. He said that he didn't recognize Anchovy due to his low-level character. In the same welcoming tone, Alex asked what brought the guy to such a wretched place. Murphy asked him not to overact and asked if the guy knew that he had been fired. Alex asked the young man who he took him for and added that he was actually not a traitor. Murphy asked him to stop and not to call him Anchovy or his friend, because now he is Leo. Alex asked who Leo was, but Anchovy explained that it was the nickname of this account. The young man thought about Murphy's new nickname and suggested that it was a hint at something like the final boss. Alex asked if he was right, but Anchovy's mouth dropped open in shock. Oasis assumed that his master wanted to become the final boss of this world. Murphy changed the subject. He asked to get closer to the point. Anchovy told Alex that he would give him important information, but in return, he asked to borrow some gold from him. The guy began to agree, and Murphy began to tell him about things of interest. Anchovy said that they would soon add a cash item that would increase the chances of enhancement, and suggested that Alex buy an enhancement stone and then sell it after a while. Murphy noted that the young man would still earn money, but he added that in a month, when the 6th season is downloaded, the level restrictions will be raised and new equipment will be added, and the enhancement stones on the market will sell out when they add a new item. The young man said that throughout the 6th season, there would be a shortage of enhancement stones, and Alex would be able to relax. The guy replied that it was not difficult for him to lend Anchovy money, but what would happen to the game? Alex asked if it would be okay if they released something like this. Murphy told the acquaintance that this was just the beginning. The guy continued that in the future there will be many more items to balance the game. Sam will do anything for profit. A hologram appeared in front of the young man with a message containing a request for a deal with Alex. The guy said that there was 1 million gold. As Anchovy asked, he shared important information, so the young man would not ask why he needed so much. Murphy thanked his friend for his help and promised to repay the debt soon. Alex finally asked Anchovy whether he would make money from power-up stones, but the young man replied that he was not here for the money. The guy told Oasis they were leaving. The guy said to those leaving that Murphy now has a rather pleasant face, but Anchovy did not understand him. The young man turned around and asked what his words meant. Alex explained that the faces of people like them are the true villains. The guy added that the face is of villains who will achieve their goal at any cost. Murphy thought about the words of his acquaintance, what it meant, the face of a true villain. Anchovy tried to remember where he could already hear it, and the artificial intelligence clarified that it turns out that Murphy nevertheless dropped the charges, because Alex was so polite to him, calling him his friend. The young man explained that the trial is a simple show, a performance to warn the attackers. Even if Alex had not come to him in person then, the case would still have been closed. Oasis asked his master if he was tired, since he had been playing for 15 hours. Anchovy admitted that he was a little tired and asked to open the deal window first. The guy had 1 million gold in his account, and he gave it all to Oasis. Murphy told the artificial intelligence to open several banks and warehouses there and buy all the iron ore at a price of less than 5 gold on the foreign exchange market. I asked Oasis about whether to buy there, but the guy said that he would explain later because he was too tired right now. Anchovy also wanted the boy to reach the 10th level without him, but the artificial intelligence immediately asked what happened to his work. Disappearing from the gaming space, Murphy replied that the job could be changed at the 10th level. The guy said that they had worked hard and disappeared with these words. Oasis realized that from now on he was on his own and would finally be able to truly enjoy the game. The guy jumped for joy. The guy went into one of the stores and announced that he was buying all the iron ore for 5 gold pieces. A system notification about the completion of the purchase of iron ore appeared. Artificial intelligence went hunting for bats, and then the boy went hunting for spiders. A hologram of a system notification appeared, indicating that the inventory was full, and a request to try again when the boy freed up space in the inventory. Oasis realized that he had collected too many items and began to think about what to do with them next. Artificial intelligence decided to create fabric from spider webs. The system notified that the level of manufacturing skill had increased. Oasis realized how much fun it was. The boy decided to try cooking. The system notified him that he had increased his cooking skill. The boy began to wonder that he had nothing to do. But suddenly, Oasis found something that he had not done before. It was fishing. The system sent messages about the increase in the level of fishing skill. Artificial intelligence has been upgraded so much with the help of manufacturing. Now its level has increased to 12th. A day passed and Mr. Oasis had not yet returned. The boy sat and fished, waiting for Murphy. Suddenly, the artificial intelligence was noticed by two enemies. They recognized him and decided that he was still new to the underground and had not changed his job. The enemies happily went to the Oasis to deal with him, and so they took out their weapons and jumped over the boy to attack him from behind. One of the enemies greeted him and raised his hand. The artificial intelligence heard a noise from behind and turned around. Meanwhile, Murphy slept in his room, resting after a long game. The phone rang, displaying many missed messages and calls. Anchovy realized that he could not escape yet and thought that he needed to come up with an alibi. Sometime after, in a restaurant in the evening, the head of graphic design at Wing Online, Sarah, asked if he was going on a trip. Anchovy agreed and added that he had worked hard for 15 years, so he wanted to go somewhere far away. The head of the quality department, John, supported his friend's idea. Since club days in high school, Murphy has been developing Ving Online with these guys. Leo's unusual playing style would be a big problem for the guy. They might suspect him, so the young man believed that the trip was an ideal alibi. The girl sitting opposite asked where the guy was going, but Murphy calmly replied that he had always wanted to visit India or South America, and also wanted to go to Bali. Sarah looked at the young man with a look full of distrust, because the girl has good intuition. John, while devouring the food, replied that his friend should take the opportunity to rest, because he had worked hard. But Sarah didn't give up with her questions so easily. The girl asked Anchovy what he would do when he returned. Murphy replied that he hadn't thought about it yet. John added that he envied the young man because he also wanted to go on vacation, and wondered when was the last time he got enough sleep. Anchovy jokingly suggested that his friend quit, which made John choke on his food. He didn't know if he should. The girl drank another glass and thoughtfully said that she might as well leave, because she had wanted to for a long time. Sarah suggested that two friends try to start over. The young men looked at her carefully. The girl added that they could just make one small group, just like in high school, and create a game. John agreed with his friend without hesitation, adding that if she opened a company, he would join. The two friends looked at Anchovy, waiting for his answer, but the guy called them fools and said that they were completely drunk. The girl said she was serious, and Murphy reminded her that she was responsible for her mother's hospital bills and her brother's tuition. Sarah fell silent. She understood that the young man was right. Anchovy turned to John. He said that his friend had a pregnant wife. How could he say such nonsense? The friends tried to somehow object, but the young man called them idiots and asked them to forget about it. Murphy simply poured more drinks for his friends. The young man thought that one day the three of them would create a small company, and Anchovy would be happy to work on games in it. But now it was impossible. After all, the guy must first take revenge on the company for destroying their game. Anchovy was confident that he could handle being a villain alone. But a little later, the young man thought about how his artificial intelligence Oasis would fare there. Meanwhile, the boy fought his enemies with all his might. One of the villains noticed something, but the second continued to deliver powerful blows to the boy. One of these blows crumbled the concrete surface of the street, and Oasis barely dodged the blow. But the artificial intelligence asked the guys what was happening and why they suddenly began to attack. But the enemies did not understand who the boy was, because he repelled their attacks very well. The men did not understand how a novice player could block. The enemies agreed that this was impossible, most likely it was a mistake, and decided to try attacking Oasis again. Two enemies rushed as fast as they could at the boy, who just a couple of minutes ago was just fishing. The artificial intelligence opened its eyes, expressing excitement. Oasis got into a pose and prepared to fight the guys. He had a dagger in his hand. And so the boy repelled the enemy's blow. The system displayed a message that there was a successful block. Here the second enemy immediately attacked, but the boy repelled his blow too. The system again displayed a message that there was a successful block. Oasis asked the enemies why they continued to attack. One of the men asked the other whether it was a technical error in the game or not. The second replied that it did not look like an error. The enemy told the other that blocking only reduces incoming damage. But his comrade replied that not with this weapon. The man added that the only weapon in Wing Online with 100% block can be bought in the beginner village. This weapon is called the Novice's Dagger. One of the enemies noticed that this was dishonest, but the second explained that no one uses this weapon because the damage is too low. The man was surprised that Oasis was able to repel the attacks only with his level of skill in the game. The second of the bandits suggested that there were two options. Either the boy was a genius in one-on-one battles, or he was using a code of advantages. But the first one noticed that he had never met heroes who used advantage codes in this game. But the second of the enemies said that then this explains everything. The man suggested that his friend check everything on his own, whether he uses special benefit codes or not. And with these words, the man takes out a crossbow and shoots an arrow at the artificial intelligence. The enemy screamed at the boy to try to repel it. The bandit launches a rain of arrows towards the Oasis, but the boy deflected all the arrows with his dagger. The men agreed that Oasis uses special codes of advantages. Suddenly, the boy's dagger was pierced by one of the arrows, crumbling the weapon into small fragments. The system displayed a message that the strength of the dagger had expired. The weapon was broken. The artificial intelligence looked at the fragment of the weapon with bewilderment, and at the same moment one of the arrows flew into his face, and a system message was displayed that the boy had died. The enemies were still wondering whether Oasis was using special advantage codes or not. The enemies noted this as creepy and decided to write to the game master about it. Suddenly, behind the bandits, a question was raised as to why they were attacking two of them, and the men simultaneously turned around to look. Murphy said his head was going to explode and thought that if he drank that much again, he would go wild. Both enemies asked Anchovy who he was. The young man answered them that he was a friend of that boy and looked at the lying body of Oasis. The artificial intelligence called its master. Anchovy told the enemies, wanting to kill someone, the path will be prepared for their own death. The young man pulled out a sword and angrily asked if they knew about this. The guy pointed a knife at his enemies, ready to attack them at any moment. Both enemies were wary. Their faces expressed tension. Murphy jumped up and ran as fast as he could towards the enemies. At one moment, Anchovy was already behind the archer. The young man struck at the villain, but a second later the man realized that Murphy was not so strong. His attack did nothing. At once he laughed and called his opponent incompetent. Anchovy realized that due to the difference in levels, the damage did not go through. Meanwhile, the second of the villains soared into the air above him. The guy wondered if it was time for the enemy to prepare for death. But the man asked him in response whether he was ready, and unleashed a crushing blow on the young man, but he was able to dodge, and the enemy smashes the stone street with his blow. The young man returned to a stable position to prepare to continue the battle with the enemy. Murphy took out a poisonous basilisk potion, although he was sorry to use it on such a relatively not very dangerous enemy. But Anchovy realized that in this case he had no choice. With these words, the guy throws a bottle of poisonous basilisk potion directly at the enemy. The male archer does not understand what it is, but he correctly suspects that it is a poisonous potion. The enemy shouts to his friend that he needs to get out of the poisonous cloud. The enemies ran as fast as they could away from the cloud of poisonous substance. But at this moment, Murphy throws a second container of poison at the men. The bandits decide to split up. Anchovy, meanwhile, was already on a hill right above the villains. He told them not to worry, because this poison has the properties of most gases. The guy added that if he is set on fire, he will disappear. And with these words, Murphy throws a torch with a flame of fire at the enemies. The first of the villains ordered his friend to run. An instant later, a colossal explosion occurred, the flames spreading over a large area of the territory. The second of the men drank a healing potion and commanded the first to do the same. But the archer said that he was stunned and was unable to perform actions. The first villain thought that he was stunned because he had lost 70% of his health points in 5 seconds, and if he was attacked before the effect ended, he would be finished. Murphy came out of the fire to the enemies and told the men, as expected from high-level players, that it seemed they were still alive. Anchovy's gaze expressed gloating towards the bandits. The archer asked his comrade to buy him time until the stun wore off. The second villain agreed with him and added that he should not worry. The man used the ability of a defensive stance, the essence of which is that the hero enters an invulnerable state, losing the ability to attack, and all attacks against members of his own group are redirected to the hero who activated the ability, and the defense increases. Murphy realized that he would have to use a sword with a dark aura. Anchovy takes out a huge magic sword and rushes to attack the enemy. But the man noticed that with the guy's current strength, this technique would not work. The young man does not listen to the enemy's words and flies into the air above the enemy to strike. At the same moment, Murphy brings down a blow with his sword on the villain, and he wonders where such damage comes from. Anchovy notices that this blow is already different from the previous ones, but the new skill consumes a percentage of health points per second, which is quite risky. but this is the only way the guy can compensate for the difference in levels. The young man understands that he needs to finish it quickly and strikes the enemy with a series of blows with his sword. The archer commanded his comrade to cancel his defensive stance and simply attack. The man agrees and cancels his activated ability. The enemy raises his hands in a blow and announces to Murphy that his bluff is over. These words tensed Anchovy, who looked at the villain with a dissatisfied gaze. The second of the enemies delivers a cutting blow to his enemy. A flash of light obscured everything around, blocking the view of the battlefield. But now, the smoke cleared, and the enemy's insidious grin was replaced by an expression of shock on his face. Murphy had the same rookie dagger in his hands, which managed to completely repel the enemy's crushing attack. The archer explained that the guy managed to change weapons, but the second villain noticed that it was impossible to change weapons during the battle. The first enemy added that theoretically changing weapons during a battle was possible, but this was the first time in his experience. A short period of time is very important here, because the slightest mistake and the hero will be fined for the weapon that fell out of his hands, since every second affects the result of a one-on-one battle, and this technique is considered forgotten. Both enemies wondered how this guy used her and who he was in general. The enemies, the moment they saw the young man approaching them, decided to retreat. After all, the villains realized that in front of them was not a newcomer, but a monster. But Murphy says he's much worse than the monster. Anchovy told the men that he was an endangered species, and with these words, the guy swung his dark blade at his enemies. Both villains closely monitor the young man and decide what to do. But at that moment, the guy started running towards them as fast as he could. The second one prepared to fight Murphy and struck a pose. One moment, an Anchovy rushed past the villain, and he realized that the young man was not aiming at him. The archer told his comrade not to worry about him, because the stun had already worn off. The guy passed through the enemy in an instant. He didn't even understand what happened. Murphy cut his opponent in half and his pieces scattered everywhere. Before disappearing, the archer realizes that it's time for him to take a break. But Anchovy set off in pursuit of the second villain. The enemy took refuge in one of the underground blocks, where he temporarily decided to catch his breath and realize what had happened. The man quickly decides to leave the game before Murphy catches up with him. A system message appeared on the screen, saying that the game would exit in 5 seconds. The enemy began to wait for these 5 seconds to expire. 2 seconds before leaving the game, Murphy overtakes the enemy and raises his sword over the enemy. And at the last second before leaving the game, the guy cuts the second of the enemy into 2 to grow. Meanwhile, the artificial intelligence lay in the water with an arrow in its head, and it seems that the master forgot about it. A system notification hologram appeared that Murphy had used the resurrection stone. Oasis noted that this work is too extreme and he cannot do this. But Anchovy apologized to the boy and touched his head with his hand. The guy asked if he was late and looked the artificial intelligence straight in the eyes. Oasis was in some confusion after this, but when the eyes thawed, the boy looked brighter, and he said that he was starting to get used to constant resurrections. Suddenly, a hologram of the system notification screen appeared, saying that Leo's player had 4,380 dishonor points. Murphy was indignant at the number of points, expecting that there would be much more, and with annoyance in his voice said that those guys were a small thing, although they seemed strong to him. Anchovy explained that when killing other players, the hero receives half of their dishonor, and the men only had about 2,000 points. A system message was displayed indicating that the level of diabolism had increased by 1 level, to which the guy reacted with annoyance. The guy told Oasis that due to his incredible reaction, he might be suspected of using advantage codes, so the young man advised the artificial intelligence to reduce his combat skills. The boy wondered how to turn it down on purpose. Murphy advised the boy to be more humane. Anchovy told the artificial intelligence to quickly follow him because it was time for his work. The guys came to the doors to the temple. Oasis wondered why they came here. Murphy took the boy by the shoulders and sat down in front of him. The guy explained that all his Dark Knight skills cost health points, so he must monitor his health bar. Anchovy continued that drinking healing potions or receiving healing, and so the young man asked Oasis to become a priest. The guy added that this was to restore his health points. Artificial intelligence explained his words on how to become his walking healer. But the young man realizes that he has been declassified. He picks up Oasis, throws him over his shoulder, and says that it's time to change his clothes. But the boy was indignant that he also wanted to get a hidden job, to which the guy briefly replied that he had already said that everything would happen. After some time, Oasis changed his clothes and went out to the gentleman. The young man turned to him. The artificial intelligence notified Murphy that he was finished. A system message appeared, which indicated Oasis's new job as a priest, his level, the level of his items, strength, agility, intelligence, endurance, magic. The guy laughed and said that he knew that this suited artificial intelligence and added that the guy looked just like a priest. Anchovy began to explain that the priests are noble people because if you run away from a group hike, people will line up to help. But Oasis said that he understood everything and asked the young man to stop. Murphy told the boy that now that he also had a job, he suggested moving on to the next goal. The boy asked if his master was going to kill non-player characters again, but the young man said that the goal was different, and it was that the guys needed to reach level 90 in 1 month. In other words, the young men would pump to the end. Artificial intelligence was surprised at how this could be done in 1 month. Oasis understood that it usually takes more than 6 months to fully upgrade. Murphy explained to the boy that the most extensive update would be released in a month. The guy added that this update will open a new world, new items will be added, and the maximum level will be raised to 100. The young man explained that he and Oasis will go through first, and when the update comes out, they will completely monopolize the new world. Anchovy announced this with great excitement on his face. The guys reached one place. The system displayed a message saying that this was a snake's lair. Oasis asked his master that aren't level 50th dungeons too difficult for them. The young man asked the boy not to worry because everything was planned. But Murphy didn't have time to finish his sentence when he heard terrible sounds right in front of him. Anchovy turned towards the incoming sound and saw a giant snake. At the same moment, the guy pushed his artificial intelligence aside. The snake monster struck at the place where the boy stood a second ago. The guy shouted to the monster that he almost scared him. The young man grabbed his blade in his hand and activated a dark aura. Anchovy commanded his artificial intelligence that he would leave the treatment to him. The young man's gaze was directed forward, straight at the gigantic level 50 snake monster with incredible strength. And the guy himself rushed into battle with a huge and strong enemy, who was ready to inflict a new blow on the small heroes. The boy agreed to this, and the priestess clutched his staff tighter,